Hello everyone, and welcome back to Stellaris. I'm Lord Forrent, here with a guide on a combination of diplomacy and espionage. So espionage is new to the Nemesis patch, and some people are struggling with it. So I thought I would go over what it is, how to use it, and as part of that, talk quickly about diplomacy as well. So when you click on another nation, you can either do it through on the map, clicking on their little shield, which will bring it up, or you can go to the contacts page and try and find them. I usually tend to use the click on the map because it's much easier to actually find them that way. Sometimes they're scattered around it, especially if you go by names. Trying to find a specific bordering person can be a little bit tricky. Once you've done so, or open them regardless, you will have the option of, if you're here, you can either select diplomacy or espionage. However, both start from the diplomacy page. In order to do the espionage, you have to go to build spy network. So I've already been building a spy network there. So let's go here. So this person right here, you can see we know a little bit about them. That's because we actually had half-decent relations. But I could build a spy network. You have to have a spare envoy to do so, which means nations that are good at diplomacy are also pretty good at spying. So just keep that in mind, that if you're playing the diplomacy game, you can play the spy game, but if you don't have any envoys really at all, it's going to be hard to do either. So you assign an envoy, and then it will bring you to this page here. But let's talk about diplomacy first quickly. So for diplomacy, you have a variety of options. Some of them are more interesting than others. Some are useful. So you've got your standard, let's offer a trade deal, trading stuff. You can even trade systems if the price is right, but the odds are they're not going to give it up. Favors is useful because it gives you an asset you can use in the Galactic Senate. It might be worth buying some of those, especially if you've got an excess of resources. But the big ones are improve relations, harm relations. So a lot of the trade stuff that you can do through diplomacy is limited by what your relations are. If you've got good relations, you can't necessarily do hostile actions as much. If you are negative relations, you can't make deals with them usually. There are some exceptions. So the big ones are right here. You've got a defensive pact, form a non-aggression, I already have one. Form a research, guarantee independence, close borders, demand vassalization, demand tribute, blah, 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 blah. You can see them all. So one of the big ones is establish embassy. When you first discover a lot of people in the galaxy, you're going to get tons of requests for embassies. It basically increases the ability to do espionage versus them, but improves opinions with them, as you can see. Improving the effectiveness of friendly envoys and establish intel targets of another. So it's usually worth doing so. It will give you a little bit more knowledge with them. It tends to keep your relations in pretty good check. Now, I cannot see why they have a negative opinion, or they had a negative opinion of me. It's been going up because I've assigned an envoy to improve relations. Obviously, it takes an envoy in order to improve relations. So if you don't have a lot of envoys, it's hard to manage your inter-empire diplomacy. So be aware that having one or two envoys really can cause quite a bit of trouble. So everything you sign with somebody costs you influence. As you can see, we've got a non-aggression pact that costs 0.5 influence, a migration pact 0.25, research 0.25, and I have two commercial pacts costing 0.5. This means managing your influence. Early game, you're going to have trouble with expanding using it. Later on, you're going to have trouble maintaining your diplomacy with it, well, especially if you're wanting to expand. Because taking systems and getting claims is going to cost you influence, but trying to have diplomacy going as well is going to cost you it as well. So it's important to realize that you can run out of influence rather quickly if you sign too many inter-empire agreements. Thankfully, these agreements have been improved recently. So non-aggression, I mean, most of these are self-explanatory, but I will point out if you do a research agreement, it actually tells you going into it what how many techs you would benefit from and how many techs they would benefit from. This could be very useful. As you can see, I would get 5, 7, 9. They'd get 11, 11, 10. Does not make a great amount of sense for me to sign a research agreement with them because they would gain a much larger benefit than I would. It could be used to prop up a weak empire. You could make a trade agreement Here, you can also increase favors to get them to sign trade agreements with you when you're behind in tech. And obviously it will give a minimum level of intel, and it will give the other side an idea of what your technology is, which can be quite useful. For some reason, you can guarantee independence on basically anybody right now. They almost always accept. It's kind of strange. Closing borders will hurt your relations, but they'll no longer be able to travel through your system. Demand vascularization and tribute. I have never ever managed to actually use this except on a single one planet empire I was currently sieging and about to land an army on. They were willing to become my vassals. I suppose you could pull it off if you've got good relations and you just own 9/10 of the galaxy, but it doesn't tend to work very well. Tribute, neither as well. It's unfortunate. Asking to be their vassal is quite interesting, though. This might be one of the few Paradox games you can actually join an empire and then break free later. Be aware, though, once you join the empire, if they get good relations with you, they can assimilate you given time. At which point you'll lose the game. So be very wary of doing it. But if you've got a massive empire right next to you, let's say with these guys were sitting right on my border, asking to become, in this case they're a corporation, so I'd become a subsidiary, could be very useful. It would keep me alive. It would give me time to build up. I could then plot and build up in anticipation of breaking free. Be aware, though, if you are a vassal, though, you cannot settle new planets or expand except as war goals. There is a tech that allows you to do so. Oh, actually, maybe it's changed. I haven't tried it yet in this patch. But normally it's this feudal society, subject power relations penalty -50. I guess they've changed this. This used to allow vassals to expand, making it a very strong game. Using vassals or subsidiary nations is a very powerful thing. You can have quite a vassal swarm. Obviously, remember the AIs are not probably as good as commanding their fleets as you are. So, offering tribute, though, is a very good way of keeping nations to invade you. Declaring war is something, obviously, you have to do. Making claims, though, remember, it costs influence, so you do want to have positive influence, even if you could sign more diplomatic agreements. Commercial pacts are interesting because it will give you a certain amount of gold per month, or energy credit. Sorry, I've been playing too much Imperador. I've got to find a non-Gestalt consciousness I haven't already signed an agreement with. Suffice to say, basically everybody in the galaxy tends to sign commercial pacts if you're not at war. These guys won't because they're criminal heritage. Oh, come on. Yeah, here we go. So if you sign a commercial pact, it will tell you, sort of like it did for the tech, what the benefit is. So right now from this commercial pact with this corporation, I get 10 energy credit a month. They get almost 14. So it's in their favor, but it's free energy credits. There's really no reason not to sign them other than to conserve your influence. Migration, if you've got a population that can move between systems, it will allow your pops to migrate and grow on their worlds and theirs to grow on yours. Can be extraordinarily useful to get population in your empire to settle worlds that you couldn't otherwise. So if we take a glance over here at this world, this is a savannah world. Looks pretty normal, but if you will look at it, this is, where's my starting species? I think my starting species was these guys, the Gloss Warhini or something like that. Actually, no, I was right. Oh, I don't actually have the ability. Apparently my entire species has disappeared. It might have been these guys or something. Basically, I had very low habitability, but because I had a migration treaty, these guys from one of the worlds have migrated to my lands, and they have Savannah preference, so I can, in fact, settle them on a Savannah world, which if I had settled before with low habitability, my people would have been unhappy, probably rioted, and who knows what other disasters could have occurred. So anyway, that's just, I wanted to quickly go through diplomacy. You can also insult if you've got the Federation diplomacy ability, which is under the diplomacy tradition tree. It's this one. You could form a diplomacy, which is kind of like a little alliance. Later on, if you want to, you can transition it to a proper alliance in one of the 4 forms and then build up there. You can basically become like a hegemon and controlling 3 nations, kind of. It's a very powerful thing if you can do it. It's a great way to play it if you're going for the diplomacy game, especially versus AIs. Obviously, it won't work against people, but you can get allies, basically. It's very strong in that sense. So, moving on to espionage. I wanted to make sure you guys understood diplomacy first because it does use your envoys as well. So you have to choose whether you want to do spying or do diplomacy. So when you start, you have a spy network up here. And it has a different level. I believe each one of these is about, I think, 10. And you have a minimum and a maximum infiltration level. Like if you, you have a 0 minimum infiltration level, but you have a maximum level. You have a intel level, which is different than your infiltration level. So as you can see, I have an intel level at a certain amount, which is a base of 30 because we have a diplomatic pact, right? That would be the cap, except if we go further down, I have an infiltration of 49, which means I have more intel. They do not add to each other. Whichever is the highest one matters. So in this case, I've been infiltrating them for quite a while. So my spy network intel gives me more intel than my non-aggression pact with them does. That does unlock certain things. As you can see, the government intel has plenty of stuff. I know their authority, ethics, capital, ruler, civics, stuff like that. But my diplomacy is low, so I don't know what CBs they have relative. I know what CBs, relative power, rivalries, and federation names they have, but I don't have any of the higher diplomacy, like why don't they like me stuff yet. My military intel has grown up some. It was none a while back, but now I have a little bit. Kind of gives me an idea of how relatively strong their nation is and where their star bases are. I don't know where their worlds are. They could have some worlds here. I can't see everything. You'll see that parts of it are grayed out. I don't even fully know where their borders end, but I do know where they have star bases and some of their capital stuff. Now, how do you grow the star base? Well, first off, you're going to need some tech. So under I believe it's the science one. Let's see. Yes, you get stuff like quantum hacking, code breaking +2. Every nation at the beginning seems to start with a certain level of, as you can see, there's more text for this, encryption. Certain nations like hive minds, I believe, have a higher one. I could be wrong. But it seems to be harder to infiltrate them at the beginning. And that does limit what you can do at the beginning. So if you picked a operation, this is very similar to archaeological sites if you're used to it, but there is a chance that you get caught and there's penalties. So if we were to sabotage the starbase, it tells us that the difficulty is hellish. This means that trying to complete this mission would be very hard, and it's very likely we would have a negative outcome. All right. So there are ways to get around that. The biggest one is adding assets to it. If we are to add an asset, it adds a skill bonus to the mission. It basically has an increase of, it's kind of similar to how archaeological sites work. You run through it, what your clue, your insights are. Insights can increase your bonus so that you can eventually complete the mission. You can't get caught. I have not managed to get caught yet. I tried. But you can kind of see what the operation difficulty is under the description. So it says operation difficulty 2 with a base of 4, but my relative encryption is lowering it to 2. It requires an infiltration level of 10. So at the beginning, you're basically only going to be able to do gather information, prepare sleeper cells, and acquire assets. Initially, you'll only be able to gather information, and so it's worth running that several times to increase your infiltration level to a point that you can complete other missions. You can do like Spark, you can do a lot of stuff with this. I won't go into all of them right now. But preparing sleeper cells allows you to keep your infiltration level if you pull away your spy master, because you do have an envoy there. You can deassign them. Acquiring assets are these. Each assets have a bonus to what your maximum spy level is. So each of these assets, by increasing your spy network by a certain amount, increases your maximum infiltration level. So you keep infiltrating and making progress towards it. which of course unlocks more options. The highest one right now is armed privateers and stuff. But each of them, when you assign them to an operation, they give a bonus towards the skill. We saw it briefly when I did the other one. But if we do acquire asset here, you'll see a difficulty of 3, skill bonus 0, insight 0. If we add a asset to it, all of a sudden we'll have a skill bonus of 4. The odds of increasing, having a successful mission will help. Each of them has different bonuses. In this case, since we're dealing with robots, I believe they're both robotic. I haven't tried it yet in this game on anyone else. I've been playing around with these guys because they're threatening me. But this one gives a bonus towards military operations, which obviously you can kind of see, you can toggle what there are. So like arming privateers, giving it a military operation skill would probably be helped. Sometimes they can be sacrificed and you can lose them if the operation is exposed. So be aware of that. This one gives a government operation. So if we were to do something like extort favors or something, as you can see, there's categories of what they do. It wouldn't help in extort favors, but for acquire assets, if we were to add this one, government ones, it has an 8 bonus. So the odds of us getting a breakthrough are much higher. So make sure you use the correct assets for the correct missions. It does give you a nice little category. It is slightly confusing when you look at it because it's kind of like, oh, well, okay. But check what category it is in and then assign the proper assets to it. I haven't explored it in complete depth, the higher levels of it. I haven't played a game where I just sabotaged everybody. But you can do stuff like spark diplomatic incidents and cause problems with their diplomacy, steal favors to be used either to, manipulate your diplomacy. You could probably use it to help you get a chance of taking planets or getting resources from them, but also you can use it in the Senate to get their support for resolutions or support to oppose resolutions. Acquiring assets we've gone over. Sleeping cells keeps your network. If you pull away your spy master, can be very useful. Ideally, you should have a spy network set up on basically everybody, except maybe close allies or really weak nations. Smear campaigns, you can lower the relations between two empires. This could be very useful to break apart federations or to have them break like defensive treaties or stuff. Can be really useful if you're trying to divide and conquer. Unfortunately, against AI, it's not entirely useful, and I'm not even sure how it would perform against people because they might figure it out. Stealing tech is pretty self-explanatory. You steal technology from them. It can be very useful. Sabotaging Starbase destroys a module or building on the Starbase. It does not affect the shipyards and does not, in fact, destroy the Starbase, which would be really awesome. But you could use this, because you can pick which starbase. You could use it on one of their border installations, like on a starbase here, to try and weaken some of their defenses before you invade or something. Or you could just use it to cause havoc by sabotaging trade nodes and stuff. Armed privateers gets a fleet of privateers in their lands. The problem is, in my experience of having done this a couple times in a different game, the privateers don't tend to be that strong. They're more of a distraction and annoyance than anything else. If the AI is not actively at war with somebody and their fleets are off fighting, they'll just send their fleet over there and crush the privateers and ruin your efforts. So try and use it either to, on an immense empire where they can't defend stuff up here because they've got their fleet and most of their navy down here. It can be useful. It'll do quite a bit of damage before they get up there. Or use it during a war to force them to pull troops off the front line. Just remember, diplomacy and espionage are two sides of the same coin. Diplomacy tends to be much more on the positive relations side because you get improved relations, but also stuff like declare war, make claims. But it tends to encourage trust, whereas espionage tends to weaken it, but can be stronger in the long run. It's kind of a very fun way to play, especially if you were to play something like a syndicate where you can... No one's going to like you anyway, really. So you can kind of freely sabotage and corrupt their lands. And you can have quite a bit of fun. That's what I did on one of my first games on this patch, was play a syndicate. Because, of course, you create crime on their worlds. But then you start sabotaging their assets, stealing their tech. You can cause complete havoc. I wrecked the Empire to some degree before I invaded and conquered them. So that's kind of how espionage functions. It doesn't feel like an entirely, fully, completely fleshed out system. Part of that is because as the game progresses, you have obviously more abilities and you gain more intel. Keep an eye on the encryption versus code breaking. It's just like their encryption is weak compared to my code breaking, but their code breaking is extraordinarily weak to my encryption, meaning it's much harder for them to come after me. I have not found a way, and this is kind of frustrating because it feels like there should be one. I have yet to find a way to do any counter-espionage. The best I can find is by spying on them, increasing my spy network, and then getting a chance to detect if they're spying on me. It's kind of frustrating. It feels like there should be a counter-espionage option. Maybe they'll add it later. Or if someone knows where there is one, I've looked for quite a while and still have not figured one out. Be aware that certain stuff in your government can affect stuff like infiltration levels. So if we did, like, we're a democracy here. If we did cutthroat politics, we get +1 code breaking, which can be very strong, especially code breaking. Yes, there's a lot of text to boost it, but once everyone's got that, it kind of becomes an even game. This would obviously give you +1 more. But what I wanted to point out was this Shadow Council. The Shadow Council gives maximum infiltration level +10 because you're all about spying and stuff. So be aware there are some governments that affect it. And there are some that obviously don't affect it. So just be aware that some nations are always going to be slightly better at espionage than others, ones that tend to have lots of envoys and stuff. So if you want to play a espionage-based game, remember it's not a full system on its own. It's kind of the dark side of diplomacy because you need envoys for both. It gives a great reason to have lots of envoys, though. And obviously, if you want to do actions towards it, the diplomacy tree will give you an envoy. And it will also increase trust. So this is more for diplomacy, but it can be very useful for that point as well. Unfortunately, and it feels weird, there's no tree or any of these stuff that tend to boost one's espionage. Kind of feels a little neglected. However, I will point out this right here is an ascension perk called Enigmatic Engineering. Not a huge issue in an AI game, but against a human player, this might be even more powerful. This gives +2 encryption, but more importantly, it disables steal technology operations, espionage missions against me. And debris from our ships cannot be studied. This basically means my tech level, unless I have a research agreement with somebody, my tech level cannot be exploited for other nations to catch up. They can't steal my tech, they can't research my ships. It's quite powerful in that sense. Let's see, there is the other one here. Shared Destiny will get you 2 more envoys if you need to. It's more used for subject management, but if you need envoys, that's one way to get it. Let's see, I don't think there was any other ones. Let me just double check. No, there isn't. So anyway, that's the one to pay attention to, are those 2, Shared Destiny, and obviously the Enigmatic Engineering can be very useful in the sense that then no one else can exploit you. So if you're playing like I am in this game, a very tall technological empire, I'm the galaxy's tech leader outside of the fallen empires. None of the AIs can steal my tech. I'm sure they've tried. The AIs don't tend to understand the concept of not annoying overly strong empires, but this will help. And in a multiplayer game, that perk, I have to imagine, having not played a full multiplayer game, that perk would be, the Ascension perk would be very strong because it would allow you to get a tech lead without other people just playing an espionage game and stealing it. It kind of crushes a lot of the espionage options when you consider the fact that steal tech is probably the strongest operation you can do outside of maybe arming privateers. So anyway, thank you guys all for watching. Hopefully this has explained diplomacy and espionage a bit better to you. I do recommend you go play a game. If you want to have a lot of fun with espionage, play a nation where you can get caught left and right, like the Syndicate. Of course, you do need the Megacorp expansion for that, but Can be quite fun. It's always fun playing a nation that does diplomacy here, which is why I'm playing one that has 5 envoys without any real bonuses towards it. Trading, getting people. At some point I'll form a federation and start to expand from there. Probably go on to become hegemon, then emperor of the galaxy, just mainly using diplomacy rather than might. It's a very possible way to play in this game. And if anybody, like these driven assimilators, start to cause me problems, my espionage will be able to weaken them because I've already built it up. So espionage, diplomacy take time. If you're going to use it, start doing it early. You can't do it at a moment's notice at the end. It takes time to build up. And the best time to do it is before the other side starts building up their diplomacy as well. So getting a tech lead, getting some of those encryption, encoding, code breaking stuff, and getting a lead on it. Once you're in position, as long as you don't cause any trouble, they'll never be able to catch you. And you'll have the advantage for the rest of the game. So anyway, that's going to be it for this guide. Hopefully it's helped. If you guys like to see any other Stellaris guides, let me know in the comments or on my Discord. Please do like, subscribe if you've watched this far. Thank you guys all for watching. I do appreciate it. And I will see you guys all in another guide or video. Bye for now.